My name is Juan Antonio Lozada, and I am a student at the Executive MBA program at the Franco School of Finance and Management. I'm also an attorney with about 20 years of experience, and I have owned my own immigration practice in the United States for 8 years out of those 20 years, and I have been an attorney. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of the concepts that we learned at the 3-day seminar on global society. I'm going to also be talking about what some jurists are calling the legal singularity, and is that point in history when the legal profession will change forever as technology, AI agents, and such will be doing many of the activities that in the past used to be done by associates, by paralegals, by even attorneys. The legal profession is changing in significant ways, but before we talk about all these changes and some of the resistance to change that is quite common in some of the more established business models that for many years have created value to the professionals that work on those fields, changing to a completely different paradigm, a completely different business model, and moving away from the safety, for example, the hourly rate, which is, again, how many large law firms in the world have built their businesses, have become 3,000 law firms with a global presence, how that model is being disrupted by AI agents, by teams of AI agents, and what that means for the legal profession as we try to increase the access to justice and close or narrow the access to justice gap that has been with us from the beginning of the profession. The reality is about 80% of the people that require legal services normally go without, simply because they can often not afford the fees of most attorneys. This is true in almost every single country in the world, but specifically true in the countries, industrialized nations like the United States, like Canada, like most countries in Europe. This is a trend that we hope to see ending or changing in many ways, thanks to the advent of these new technologies and the ever-present influence of that artificial intelligence will have in our legal profession. So let's talk a little bit about where we are. Donald Trump has just become elected president. He has promised one of the biggest or largest deportations in history. What does that mean, and what does technology or being in a digital society, how does that affect the ability of governments, of leaders, of politicians to actually carry out some of these electoral promises that oftentimes are made in order to get votes, in order to advance, these somewhat incendiary, polarizing narratives, with oftentimes the help of artificial intelligence. One of the concerns that one of the thinkers we study, Harari, discuss in his book Nexus, it has to do exactly with this: how in the current state and age, and because of the exponential growth of artificial intelligence, we now are facing, for the first time in history, an autonomous system that does not require input in order to create knowledge, in order to create content, or even sometimes make decisions. I think that is the big difference that Harari makes between artificial intelligence and the technology breakthroughs that we have in the past. We now are facing a world where human beings are not always in the decision-making process, and this is what creates for some causes for concern. For Harari in particular, which I think his point is well taken, we have a situation where the world is changing, where governments and power has become more fragmented, and when you have societies that are increasingly more authoritarian. The case of China, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran to some extent, North Korea, of course. You have examples of how, especially in China, you have the use of artificial intelligence in order to strengthen the power of a state. An authoritarian state all of a sudden becomes this incredibly powerful state that is able to collect millions of points of data over every single citizen, create civil index, civil ratings for the population, and then it trigger or allow then the government to make decisions about what benefits that person, what level of inclusion that person will have in that society. The rise of the technologically savvy authoritarian state, I think, is one of the most dangerous uses of technology, or this technology in particular, because again, it places us in a position where you will not have an ability to go against the government. Everything that you do will be recorded by cameras. Everything you do will be recorded by artificial intelligence and by the ability, especially in China, to detect who you are based on face recognition technology that again is driven and powered by AI technology. And also, we heard quite a bit from Mustafa Suleiman, his book, The Coming Wave, that he warns us, just like Harari does to some extent, about the danger of not having containment, not having policies of containment. One of the challenges with this danger that the Mustafa Suleiman is telling us about has to do with the fact that it is difficult to get countries around the world to agree on almost anything. I think the United Nations after World War II was an extraordinary example of how the international community can come together, but this is more the exception than the rule. I think as the power becomes fragmented and as states start trying to advance their own interests, as politicians start winning elections using this new brand of populism, polarization, we're going to have a lot of a harder time having countries to agree on anything, because every country, every politician is going to be advancing their own interests, and it is normally consensus at the international level generally happens when you have a common set of beliefs. If some countries are so concerned about other countries being ahead of them when it comes to this exponential growth in AI technologies, the use of autonomous weapons, in the case of international humanitarian law, how the evolution of that area of law is going to be incredibly impactful for how we conduct the wars of the future. When we start thinking about the level of fragmentation, the end perhaps not just of some governments, but also especially in the global south, as countries become unable to get their citizens, the social net or even the security that the state used to provide, to some extent at least, we're going to be seeing many citizens rebelling against the very existence of the state with terrible consequences. And then you potentially will have industrialized countries who often are way ahead of non-industrializing countries when it comes to the use, deployment of technology, organic development of this technology. You're going to see certainly a very different future. And when many, in my opinion, if we are listening to Donald Trump talk about the massive deportations, how to use the emergency powers in order to curtail the flux of immigrants through the U.S.-Mexico border. I mean, that language is something that we're seeing more and more, and often aided by artificial intelligence bots and that are being deployed, agents that are being deployed through social media, which is where most people right now are getting their news. So when you have this combination of highly polarizing figures with this incredible use of technology to manufacture emotional connection with other human beings, and the ability to an extent that wasn't possible before, convince millions of individuals of things that sometimes are not even correct. Global warming is an example. Donald Trump does not believe in global warming, yet has deployed the use of AI agents through social media to convince many of his followers that global warming is simply a made up thing. This is just one of the many examples that where we will see politicians using to their own advantage the power to polarize in order to get people to support their positions, even if they have absolutely no scientific base to talk about. To finalize, my main point and the main points I got from this class have to do with how much more difficult it will be for the common citizen to be able to live in a world where they are not in a state of constant surveillance, and where the state have not made a very big commitment in most countries to actually use its power responsibly. Furthermore, I don't believe that most people are understanding the level of evolution or the speed of evolution of these technologies, and as a result, this disruption when it comes to eliminating the replacement theory, eliminating human beings with technology, or replacing human beings in many white-collar and blue-collar jobs with technology. This is going to be a reality way sooner than we expect, with massive migrations being the result, especially when we have governments that cease to be operational. Haiti is an example of a country that has been for many years run or somewhat run by different factions that have never been able to agree on anything, and as a result is what we call a failed state. I believe failed states will become more common as people lose economic opportunities, especially in the global south. Many of them will try to immigrate to countries like the United States, that with governments like Donald Trump, that will then use their powers, and including emergency powers, to justify incredibly repressive use of technology in order to create a surveillance state, and justifying the surveillance state by his desire to save us from the flow of immigrants from the global south. This is unfortunately the sad reality that I see as an immigration lawyer. I believe the next 4 years are going to be some of the hardest, not just for immigrants and global mobility in general, but also for immigration lawyers. I think we're going to have tons of work, but I think our clients are going to be every day less able to afford their legal services. I think jobs that many of the ones they do now in the industrialized countries are going to also start being outsourced to technology. And this is going to create a problem, because you're going to have tremendous need, and unless we're able to use technology, deploy technology to achieve this legal singularity, where legal services become readily available, and when AI models are used to provide this help, I believe many of these immigrants are not going to be able to confront, in an effective manner, what they're going to be facing for the next 4 years. So again, this is Juan Antonio Lozada. Appreciate your attention, and I hope this is helpful, and take care. Bye-bye.